All right, so we're good to go. So Emma and Ashlynn. So I've been. My name's Eric Bach. I work with NEI. I'm out of the. Well, I work out of my house out in New Orleans. Our main office is in Lafayette, Louisiana, and then we do have an office in Norcross. I'm going to put my information at the bottom of this page here, and I'll send out this agenda to all the emails as a follow-up, so that you all can get in touch with me if y'all need. But definitely, I'll put this out in the email. So I have been working with Carrie a little bit on putting together a little training for y'all regarding the Trimble, TerraSync, and Pathfinder Office software. So today, in session 1, we're basically going to cover some of the basics of the software, Pathfinder Office, just real quick intro to that, and kind of a dive into this data dictionary. What I feel is when it comes to data collection, it kind of makes it easier if you set the data dictionary up. And then towards the end of this session, we will cover the TerraSync software, just like an overview of all the menus, kind of going through the ins and outs of the software. So I'll bring up my GPS on the screen, and at the end, we'll just kind of go over a little bit of Q&A. So we're going to do 4 sessions, but basically we'll have enough to where in the 4th session, there'll be some time to kind of review everything over again. And at any time, just feel free to, if you have a question, feel free to ask. I'm not sure if y'all are just watching or if y'all want to just kind of, if y'all actually have Pathfinder Office on your computers and you wanted to go through some of this on your computer. You know, Carrie, I kind of forgot to ask about that, but will any of y'all be running Pathfinder Office on the computers or really just kind of watching what I'm doing?
Probably mostly watching today. I know we have Pathfinder at the Florida office and the Atlanta office, but I don't have it at my remote office, and Emma does not either. And I'm not sure if Ashlynn is working remotely or not today.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have it on my laptop.
Okay. Just curious, you know, is there any questions that Ashlynn or Emma or even Carrie that y'all may have before we get started today? Or maybe just tell me if y'all have used the equipment before or the office software before, just kind of so I have a little heads up of maybe for your experience. So feel free if y'all want to talk, go ahead, and I'll just give y'all the floor for a second.
This is Carrie. I'll go ahead and say that I've used all of the softwares, and I'm just looking forward to this whole series as a refresher on all the basics because it's been so long. And I don't use Pathfinder enough, you know, because every time I do it, it's like I have to try to jog my memory and remember each step. So I think this will be helpful for me for that.
Cool. Thank you.
This is Emma. I'm pretty much in the same boat as Carrie. I don't really use Pathfinder, but I do use the TerraSync.
Okay, good.
Yeah, same for me. And I'm curious about, because I'm not really familiar with setting up the fields in the Trimble unit to fill in the table. So that's really what I'm interested in. We have it set up in Florida, but I didn't do it. So I'm really curious about setting those up.
Okay, and that was the setting up the fields when you collect the data, or the settings? Okay. Okay,
yeah,
good. So that would be the data
dictionary. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep, perfect. All right. Well, we will dive right into Pathfinder Office. Anytime that you need, just tell me to slow down or stop or whatever, and recover something, we can do that. So basically, I'm just going to run Pathfinder Office. I'm running Windows 7. I need to upgrade here pretty soon to Windows 10. Apparently, they're stopping support for Windows 7. But anyway, Pathfinder runs on 7, 8, 10. Most people are using 7 or 10 these days. So we're just going to run the Pathfinder Office software. When it starts up, the first thing it's going to ask for is a project. And you can either go into an existing project. So right here is a CPRA project that I have. But for class today, we'll just create a new one. And I'm just going to call this ATO Botanical Garden Training. Now, this is going, the default here, when I hit enter, it took this whole name and this project name, and it put it under the default, the C users, Eric. It's a long string, and depending on how yours is set up, it could be longer than this. You can actually modify Pathfinder Office to default. I think I have one to where it defaults straight to my C drive here. I have one called GNSS Projects. I've since uninstalled it, but you can modify it to where that link is to a different location, and all that takes is a browse right here, and it's not hard to move that. When I hit create here, it's going to create this project folder, and then it's going to make 3 additional folders. So I'm just going to hit OK right here so y'all can see this. And basically, right now I have a blank map, but here is the project name. You can change, this is called the project changer, to different projects, but we're just going to go to Atlanta Botanical Garden. And then there's this little yellow folder with a blue and green globe. It's kind of hard to see on the screen. This is my C drive. So here is where it built the project, Atlanta Botanical Garden Training. I spelled it wrong. And then we have 3 folders here: backup, base, and export. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a different project here so y'all can kind of see what happens. So the folders in the training one were empty. But as you start transferring files, the backup folder, well, that's not a good example. Let me go to a different project. CPRA, where'd that one go? Trying to find one that has some good data in it. Well, when you do a transfer, it creates a backup of the file. So there's always going to be a backup. So anytime you use data transfer, it'll create a backup of the .ssf, and typically it creates a backup of the raw data. So there's really 3 backups of your data. The next folder is base, and right now this is empty as well, but when you go to post-process, it'll grab a file from the base station and put it in there. We'll explain that more on the 3rd session. And then the export folder is where you put the data once you transfer it, clean it up if you want, and then you export it out to an Esri shapefile or some other format we have, like Google Earth or maybe a spreadsheet. That would go in the export folder. So we'll kind of talk about that a little more as we go along. But right now, our folder here, whoops, wrong project. Our folder on the Atlanta Botanical Garden Training is empty. And once we start working in the next day or so, this will start filling up with information. Now, as far as the map or the software here, we have a toolbar across the top. It's got our basic menus. Everything really resides under utilities. The 3 main utilities that we'll discuss the next couple of days will be data transfer, differential correction, and export. But we also have the data dictionary editor, which we're going to do in a little bit. And on the last session, we'll probably talk about some of these studios and some of this stuff in the other folder. Typically, not a lot of people use this other folder. I use this for troubleshooting people's files if there's a problem, things like that. But these are the 3 main ones right here. Also, what we see here in the utilities menu is also displayed here as a quick tool on the left side here. So data transfer is this tool right here. Differential correction is the next one, and then export. So these same tools that pop up here are also on the left side. First thing we're going to cover, once you set up a project, is you want to set up the units, the coordinate system. So these are just a couple things you can go in. Some people like to see the data in meters. If that's the case for you all, you would just change that to meters, square meters, whatever you want to have set for your project. We'll just set it all metric for right now. We also have, in that same screen, precisions. So this is how accurate the data was that you collected. So when you first start out and you don't process, it may say up to 10 meters. When you process the data, depending on the GPS, it can get accurate down to centimeter and inches. So it's just something we're going to cover in a later session, but here's where we would set that up. And then we have confidence levels. So our Trimble gear is spec'd at 68 precisions, which is basically RMS. So if you took 100 GPS shots, 68 would fall within that range. They're pretty liberal with their numbers, so usually it's better than that. If you need to see anything higher, like 2D RMS, you can choose these other precisions here. Default out of the box is always a 68 precision. Don't think we're really going to talk too much about offsets, but that's what this north reference is here. If you ever do offsets in the field, you can do true versus magnetic. And this can be changed at any time while the project's open. So that's under options and units. Next thing we have is coordinate system. I'm working in Louisiana, so I usually use state plane. We can also default this to latitude, longitude. Sounds like y'all have offices in Georgia, but then y'all do some work in Florida. So depending on what coordinate system you need to see the data in, you can change this. And the most common ones are this lat long. All the way at the bottom, we will see state plane nat 83, and then some people use the UTM coordinate system right down here at the bottom. So it just depends on what you want to see. The data is always collected in lat long WGS84, and it's not until you export it that it actually changes that coordinate system. Here in the software, it's really just for viewing purposes. So out of the box, it'll collect lat long. If you need to change that, you can change it here. And we'll cover this a little more when we go into the export. And then last, we will do this style of display here. The main thing here is how, if you do use latitude, longitude, there's 3 ways to express the coordinates: degrees, minutes, second, decimal minutes, or decimal degrees. So depending on how you set it up is how it'll display in the menu. And that's really it as far as the main tools that we're going to use in here: the utilities, the options. And then later on tomorrow, we'll talk about opening windows like map, timeline, position window, and the feature properties. That'll be more when we get into viewing the data file. So there's not a whole lot in our software to set up. It's really just the options menu. So what I'm going to do now is we're gonna kind of focus in on this data dictionary here, and I'm going to ask for a little bit of input once we start building these features, because I'd like to build something that maybe that correlates to something y'all collect in the field, so it'll make more sense. So we're going to start off here under utilities, and I'm going to go to data dictionary editor, and it's going to pop up a little screen here for us. I'm going to start off by just giving it a name here. The most important thing to remember with this data dictionary editor is you have to change this version from 4.1x to 5. I wish Trimble would have switched this around to where the people running the older software had to make the change, but in this case we do. So just to show you what will happen, if I go with this old version, I'm just going to say test. When I create a new feature, it locks this old version down, and I'll show you what changes. We'll just say tree. So I created a point feature called a tree, and we have these attributes here, and the new data dictionary, the version 5 and higher, has options here for how it's displayed. So they made some enhancements between this 4 and 5 that allows you to make it easier to collect pick list versus a choice field versus a yes, no. We also have conditions. So let's say I pick a tree species equal to, well, sorry, I'm not a tree person, but maybe a quercus, like an oak tree or something. Whatever oak tree we pick, we want it to bring up its own attributes. We can create conditions. Or let's say we have a damaged tree, and if we have a condition for the tree, let's say it's damaged, or it's a good tree, or it's healthy, depending on what you pick, it can show different attributes. That's what condition is. But this is kind of locked out with this new version. Let me just add something. We'll make some very common names here. So I'm just going to save this out. Now, if you accidentally create a, I'm going to put this in the folder here. Let's say we accidentally created this with the 4.x, or let's say we have an older one. Let's say y'all said there was a few y'all had from Florida that was previously built. And let's say it's built on this older one, but you want to update it to take advantage of the new functionality. We could go back into the data dictionary editor. And if we go to open an older project like that, or an older DDF, the first thing it's going to do right here is ask me, hey, it's an older version. Do you want to update it? And I can say yes. And that'll just enable it now for me to take advantage of these new features. So before we were locked down the pick list, now you'll see we have the 3 other ones. And now condition is enabled. So if y'all do have an older data dictionary, in which y'all might, because this changed, I think version 5 came out probably 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know how old the data dictionary is in the field, but if it is older, you can open it that way. But what I'll do here is I'm just going to start from scratch. I just wanted to point out what the difference between these versions were, so that you know moving forward, like, oh, I made this and those features aren't showing up. That's how it happened and how to fix it. All right, so now we'll just do another one. And we'll choose 5. Some of my customers like to put a comment field in here, so we'll say something like version 1. And we can set that up. Once we do this, the first thing in our list really that we can do is build a new feature. So features are like, we have point features, line features, area features. So I'm not sure what you all collect in the field. So if you'll kind of want to give me an idea, let's start with maybe a point feature that you would collect, and we can build something around that to use all the attributes. So if someone wants to kind of give me an idea of something to put in here, we can do that.
This is Carrie. I typically collect points for rare plant individuals, okay, and then say polygons for kind of smaller managed areas, and then larger managed sites.
Okay, cool. Let's start with that then. So
and I might only do a line for maybe like a waterway or something. I don't use that very often.
Okay, well, we'll use all 3 of those as an example. Once we get into the point feature here for the rare, I'll just call this rare plants. I want to kind of point out here, and thank you for giving me that info. If we typed in something like this, like a rare plants with a space there and more than 8 characters, sounds like y'all use Esri. And if we're going to a shapefile, Esri, their format truncates at 8 characters. So, and it doesn't like spaces. So what it'll do is it'll make it an underscore, and then it's going to cut it off at 8 characters. So you might end up something like that looks like this. That's actually more than 8, something like that. So what I usually do is I'll just do R for rare, and then I'll do a capital letter. Some people like to do underscores. And then under alias, this is what you'll see in the field. I spell it out and put the space. So just keep that in mind when you're building these, especially if you're going to go to Esri. Keep the feature name under 8 characters so it doesn't truncate it. And then write out what you want or any special character in the alias. It doesn't like you to put special symbols like a $sign or that. The Esri software will not like that at all. So alias is what you see in the field. Feature name is what's stored in the GIS. Keep it under 8 characters for a shapefile. It's different if you were using Google Earth or like a spreadsheet. Actually, spreadsheet doesn't like spaces either, so just kind of keep that in mind. And then here's where we'll choose point, line, or area. In this case, we're going to keep it as a point. And then I'm going to go over here to default settings. And we're going to come back to this menu in a little bit after we build some stuff. You know, in the past, we used to require minimum positions. Well, you still can. Let's say you want to average 10 positions on the point you shoot. If I went out and shot or collected data on a rare plant and I hit log in the software, basically what happens is it's going to start counting. And let's say I tried to store it at 5 positions. We get a little warning message that say, hey, you didn't meet your minimum requirement. Do you want to continue? And you can tell it yes, and it would finish counting and averaging 10 positions. Or it would, if you told it no, it would just store it at 5. We'll come back to this other stuff down here at the bottom for the photo and these labeling once we get some attributes in. So I'll make a note to kind of come back in there at the end. As far as logging interval at the top here, we keep this at default at 1 second. In the past 15 years ago, maybe even longer, you had to match it with the base station, and back then it was like a 5 second. So it would log one shot, it would wait 5 seconds, log another shot, wait 5 seconds. So if you had to average 10 positions, it would take about 50 seconds. We don't need to do that anymore. Everything is done with this 1 second interval. And we also recommend this minimum positions. These days, 5 to 10 positions is sufficient. And you don't need to set a minimum if you don't want. Well, I guess you need at least one. You want at least one position. So that's kind of the basics there. And then we have this symbol tab here at the top. Now, when you install Pathfinder Office, it comes with the Trimble font. And if I hit change here, you'll see all your different symbols. Now, there's not a whole lot of symbols in here in the Trimble world. And the closest thing I have is a couple of trees here as far as plants. You know, since you can be in Florida, we'll do a palm tree. And then we want to make this green. We can change the color. If you have Esri or other software installed, you can go in this font list and see all kinds of fonts. So here we have Esri's fonts. There's a ton of Esri fonts. But you can change these symbols around. I'm not even sure what plants would be under. Maybe, I don't know. We know how it is. No, those are just big signs. We can change it around. But anyway, you can, if you have other software installed and they come with their own fonts, you can use those different fonts. I'm going to keep it simple, stay with the Trimble, and go with palm tree. And there's another one. I don't know what that is. The Trimble Pathfinder Office is the default font. You can change the size if you like. When we're done, we're going to hit OK. So we went through the 3 tabs, kept it all together under 8 characters, pretty much left default alone for now, and we changed the symbol. I'll hit OK, and you'll notice here on the left under features, we have R plants. Rare plants is in parentheses. That just means we'll see as the alias. And then our next option is down here at the bottom, and we have new attributes. So we're going to go through each one of these attributes. So we'll start with, we'll just start at the top, a menu. A menu is the nicest thing to have when collecting data because you don't have to type on the small keyboards. So if you have a pick list of rare plant species names that you want to add in here, we'll just go with that, I guess. We can set this up. Now, you could either hit the new button here and type these in manually. I'm just going to type test. Or you can hit this assign button. And if you had a spreadsheet of your species list, you could just open it in Excel or whatever you have it in, and you could just right click and paste it in here, and it would show up in your list. Carrie, do y'all currently have a little drop-down list for your, or what do you have set up for your rare plants right now? And I can kind of mimic that so y'all can see how it's built.
I think it varies per project, and there are a few different data dictionaries for different projects. So, but this is an area we could improve.
Okay.
I think.
Do you want to give me a couple of would species be something you collect for the rare plant or no?
Sure. Hey, Ashlynn, could you give him some from the Florida project, maybe?
Yeah, I was wondering from the beginning, would you want to create this as a big project called Rare Plants, or would you create projects per rare plant that you're looking for specifically? Because the types of data that we collect for different plants is going to vary. So,
okay. Good point.
I didn't know about that. So, for example, like plants that like clump together, we're not going to get a count on each individual plant. Instead, we're going to count the number of flowers versus plants that are really widely spread out on the landscape. We're going to be able to identify each individual plant. I don't know if that happens, but
no, that's perfect. So yeah, in that case, we would come back here. We can always edit, right? So you could call it rare plant clumping. Now, would each individual type of rare plant clumping, or however you're grouped together like that, would you want to collect a feature for each one individually? You could do it either way. You could group them together like this, and then build a menu where you pick, and then you can count. You can say number of flowers, and you can have a list. Do you usually do like each individual flowers? Do you do like 0 to 5, 5 to 10, or a percentage?
Right now we've been sort of putting a GPS point in the middle of the clump and then counting all the flowers.
Okay.
At least in Florida. I don't.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. Okay. So we can set that up. What would you call that? Like, is that a specific plant that clumps like that, or is there a group, or like a handful of them that fall in that group, and then you would just pick from a list?
Yeah, there's probably a handful that fall in that clumping group, yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just rename this a little bit. And you can always change the name, but what we'll do here is then just build and do you collect a type of species, or is there like a common name that you punch in there in the field?
Yeah, what I've been doing is having to add everything into the attribute table after the fact. So if we could have like a drop down of family and then genus and then species.
Okay, let's do it. Can you help me fill out a little bit of that? Because actually my daughter learned this in school the other day, but I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do here is I'm going to create a family. We'll just put in 2 or 3 so you can kind of see how it works. So you just want to give me a couple names?
Just Droseraceae, Droserac.
Oh, hang on. Let's see. Maybe I can do this. Well, I didn't catch that first letter.
Just put a big D.
V?
No, D, sorry, like dog.
Okay.
And then an S, a capital S, and then a capital P. Okay.
Okay. So you'll fill out the whole name, and then or however you want to do it, and then you would choose if it's. We have the options here to do pick list, checkbox, or radio button. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a pick list. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, or right-click, copy, paste. I just want to show you all the difference between pick list and radio buttons. So as you're working with this device or with this data dictionary, you can kind of see what the differences are. Oh, sorry. Let me get a code real quick. I thought I did this the other day. So this is a free software. You don't really need a license for it to do this viewer method, but I was actually working with the software the other day, so it required me to have a license. So I'm going to just install this with a TerraSync license. But when you're building these data dictionaries, if you go and download TerraSync, and I'll show you where to do all that, but if you go download the software for Windows, you'll have the option to do this viewer mode as you're building the data dictionary. I'll send y'all this link here, but it's just download, and there'll be a download for Windows. If we click right here, there's a download for Windows 7, 8, and 10. So that's all I have on my computer. And then our software always asks to activate. Sorry, I kind of should have had this beforehand, but I guess it's good y'all see it. So I'm going to choose this TerraSync activator, and basically you would just skip this step, and it'll let you use it in this viewer mode. But since I had already used it as I was collecting data with my laptop here, it didn't like that. So let's try one more time. So this just saves us the headache of transferring it to the device, seeing what it looks like, and then transferring it back. So I'll pop this up on the screen. So we have rare plants here. So what the radio button does, and it doesn't look right on my computer, I'm sorry, it'll look better when we put it on the Trimble. This screen for some reason is a little weird, but it saves you the radio button. You would have the whole thing spelled out here. It just saves you from actually having to click here and click here. So if you're collecting a lot of data, the more mouse clicks, the more time you're taking to collect. Whereas this radio button, you'll have the whole thing spelled out, and it'll just be a big list, and you just pick. Now there's a limit to 7 in that list for the radio buttons. And the reason Trimble did that is because if all 7 of these were in a line, after 7, you would actually have to take your stylus and move your screen up. So in that case, you would just use the regular type of drop down, which is called pick list. So that's this one here. So pick list. Oh, where did TerraSync go? So these are the pick list. That's what this looks like when you pick list. And the other option here is radio buttons. Have that picked. That's this here. Now, like I said, if the whole word was spelled out, it would take up the whole line. And I imagine with some of these family names and species names, they get pretty long and lengthy, so they would fill up the whole thing. And then the last one in this list is called a checkbox, but we'll save that for later. So that's the difference between radio buttons and checkbox. So in the case of the family name, we would keep it simple and just do the radio buttons. We also have this option in here to include and repeat. So let's say you're out in your study area collecting data, and it's similar flowers. If you have include and repeat, the next time you go to create the second rare plant or rare clumping plant feature, it would automatically fill out that family name. You can turn that off if you want. It's really up to you. So that's what that omit from repeat is. And I'll show an example of that when we build this. Now, the next thing here is field entry. So by default, it's not required to fill out an attribute. But if you want the field technicians or yourself required to fill out that in the field, you would just check that box. And if I do that and hit OK, it then puts well, in the field software, there'll be an asterisk. So if I save this again, there'll be an asterisk here, and it will not let me save the feature until I fill out that attribute. So we'll just click that. If I hit OK, well, let's see. Field entry family required. I thought it put an asterisk. Maybe it's because of how this looks on here. When we get it on the GPS in a minute, it'll show up. So that's kind of what the required field does. You don't need required, and I'll probably just turn it off right now, but that's how you would make something required in the field. All right, So the next one, we'll do one more menu here. Family, what was your other one? So we'll just go right to species. Do you want to give me a couple values to add, Ashlynn?
Sure.
Or just letters, whatever you feel.
You can just put like pitcher plant and sundew.
What's that? I didn't catch that one.
Oh, sorry, sundew. SUNDEW. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So basically, you fill them out. Like I said, if you had a spreadsheet, you could click on the Assign button and paste them in there. I'm just going to cancel that out. Another thing that I forgot to show here, if I hit Edit, you can have the option. Let's say you have someone new out there you're training. If you had photos of pitcher plants and the sundew and things like that, and it's someone new that you're teaching, you could actually get a little clip of a picture. I've done this with tree species, and I'll show you all that data dictionary in a little bit, where I took like pictures of leaves, and we put them as an image. So if we were training someone to go out and collect data on a specific tree, they could use the tree list or the picture list, click the picture, and it would fill out the correct attribute. So that's kind of what that image does there. There's some limitations. I think it's JPEGs and bitmap, and they have to be like a certain file size, but we've definitely done that in the past. And it's not necessary, but it kind of can show you how this is all done. All right. And then we'll keep that simple for those two. The next thing here, you mentioned number of flowers. So we have a decimal place. You won't need that. We have a minimum of 0. You got to put a maximum in there. So typically, I don't know how many flowers you have, but if you have over 1,000, you have to count. Just make sure that maximum is well enough over what you're going to be having to fill in there. So I'm just going to put a high number. Just if it needs to be higher, we can do that too. So I just created a 0 for decimal. I guess if y'all do any tree stuff and you were doing DBH, you could put decimal places. It needs a min, a max, and a default. I just set the default to 0. I'm going to hit OK. For text field, I'm going to put just a notes. So if you have to do any typing about something, and then I bump up the number of characters. I'm going to hit OK on text. Oh, I didn't know they had a limit of 230. Okay. All right. I don't know if you have to, like, our software, when we go to export the data, we have a field called, I'm just going to kind of jump forward here just to show you one thing. We have a set of metadata here called date recorded and time recorded that pulls it from the GPS, or actually the clock on your device that you're using, and it'll log date and time. So these are free. You can set, not free, we just call them lanya, but these are logged in the background automatically, and you have the ability to set that up. However, if you want to have a field for date, you could set one up. Esri does not like the word date, so you wouldn't want to just keep it just date. You can say date collected. And it'll create a date there. If you want to do time. Now, I did a little work. I was just a guy that ran the GPS and made maps, but I did work for our local Department of Natural Resources back in college. And we were out measuring salinity, and we had to log the time when we collected it, and then we had when we started the collection. and then we had to log the time at the end of collection. So I had an attribute at that time built in for time start and time end. It's the only time I've ever actually used that attribute. So these don't have to be used. I just wanted to show how they work. And the last one here is file name. Anytime you want to attach a photo, you would choose that file name attribute, and it'll let you use the camera on the device and attach a photo. Now, if I need more than one photo, we would just create another one. When I was on that same project, we had to do like a photo in our transect of northeast southwest. So we would have photo. Well, we didn't have photo at that time, but if I had to do it again, we'd have photo north, photo south, photo east and west. And when we're done, we just hit. I'm just going to hit save here, and we'll preview this out so y'all can see. So we'd have our family, our species, number of flowers we type in, any notes. I don't know, y'all have to put in weather when y'all collect. It puts the date, my time here on Central Time. And then I don't have a camera to do here on my laptop here, but on the GPS, I have a little camera icon that I actually click that allows me to take a photo. Any questions on this? I can show here in a second what one with a little more detail shows. But do y'all have any questions so far? I know Ashlynn, you were asking how to set this up, and that's it's going to be the same for all the other ones. But I just want to make sure that this kind of helps explain the feature creation, points, lines, polygons, and then all the information that you have to fill out about that particular feature. Does this help out at all?
Yeah. I guess I would just wonder now how to get those data dictionary files onto the Trimble.
Okay. We will do that shortly.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's great. Transfer to GPS. Okay. So I have one more thing to show back in the main feature part. So to edit, you just double click and it just gets you in there, or you can select it and hit edit at the bottom. I just double click, it's easier. And I'm gonna go back to default settings because I had told you earlier that I would come back in here. So labeling. This isn't labeling like you would think of in Esri where you would see your duck, or in this case, the palm tree on Esri, and it would have a label of species next to it and flower. Basically, what this means is if I use my select tool in TerraSync, and we'll cover this in Wednesday session, if you select the feature, it will pop up with information called species, flower. I can change this and say, all right, I want to know, I want to see my notes, and I want to see when this was collected. That's what the label means. So this will come up more when we do the next session. But what I do want to talk about here is this image-based names. So our software is going to label the image based off of a just like an IMG_000. But let's say I want to tag the image with maybe an ID. I don't know if y'all ID these things, but let's say now I want to tag that image with an ID field. So I could come here, image name based on, and I could pick ID. So that's how you would get it. So then when the photo is transferred over, it'll have a matching name of where you were, and we can also include like date and time and some other stuff. But this is kind of how, here in New Orleans, they're doing a big thing with City Park and their old trees, and they want to have the image tagged with the same tag ID that they tagged onto the tree. And we set it up like this. So that's just one thing you can do. So I did want to go back in there and show that. Another thing that we can do here is, if we don't like where this ID field is, we have the option to move these up and down. So here on this little bitty toolbar at the top, I have this up arrow. And let's say I want this to be the first one in the list. So we can move these up or down as needed by using those marks. Another thing we can do is, let's say, you had mentioned y'all had 2 or maybe more, but you had rare plants clumping and then just rare plants individual. A lot of the information is going to be the same. Maybe the species would change here, right? So it would keep all this other information, but let's say we would change the species. So you can go in there and edit as needed. That way you don't have to recreate the whole thing. So if you're just going to follow a similar format where you may have photos for everything, some notes, maybe you don't need a number of flowers and maybe you need some other attributes, you could then just kind of start with something and then copy and paste. I always like to use existing stuff if it's there, so I don't have to do it more than once. Next thing I'll do here is that we're just going to create a simple one for polygon and for the line. So this one, I think Carrie had mentioned waterway. So all I'm going to do here is create a line feature. Some things we have here, this is the same. The logging interval will be 1 second. You can set it up to log every so many meters instead of a time. You can also offset this. So let's say you don't want to walk down the center of, let's say it's a little stream. You could say, all right, I'm going to offset this 5 feet, or let's say 5 meters to the left. And it would log every single feature like that. I probably wouldn't set it up this way in the field because each one may be different that you have to offset, and you can actually do that in the field, and I'll show that on Wednesday. But let's say, like, for our Department of Transportation here in Louisiana, they log center line of the road or the edge of the road, and they have a GPS mount on the roof. Pretty much all the center line of the road is always going to be offset a couple feet to the left. So for them, we could set that up. That way, every time they log a road, they know it's the center of the road instead of where the antenna is on the truck. It's kind of the only example I really would use this one for. Line style, we don't have many styles. We don't have many colors, so I'm just going to pick blue. We have thin to thicker. That's all we really have for our symbology. None of the fun stuff like Esri has with dashed lines. So I'm just going to make a simple symbol, and then I'm going to give it a text. I'm just going to call it name, and then we'll do a photo. I'm just going to keep it simple for now since we used all the other attributes. And then for polygon, I'll do a manage area. I'm just going to change the symbol. Oops, I have to set that to an area feature. So our software, we call it an area, but it's polygon. Point is a single spot on the ground. Line has a beginning and an end. The area feature starts in a spot and it ends in the same spot where it started. So it just closes that off. The lines and areas are collected a little bit different than just a point. So we'll cover that in Wednesday's session. It did it again to me. Area feature. There we go. Sorry about that. And this one, I'll just give it a name. Okay. So I'm going to save that. We'll preview it real quick, and then we will, let's see where I'm at on time. We're doing perfect on time. I'll just show you. We should now see the 3 that we created in our list. Plants. Oh, we got 4. Sorry. The 2 plants, the waterway, the managed area, and the software automatically creates this point, line, and area. It's just as a default. You can actually turn that off. That'll be the last session. We'll cover how to do that. So just to show you, waterway, we just had a name and a photo. And then for the area, we just had a comment. So that is all that information. I'm going to save this out, and I'm going to turn on my GPS here. It's going to take a minute to connect. Once it connects, I will show you how to, I think Ashlynn asked how to transfer this to the device. So we're going to work on that next. So the main thing to use the next tool we have here called data transfer is you got to have this, well, in my case, I have a Geo Explorer. It's a handheld. It's got a USB cable that's plugged into my laptop. I have a software here called Windows Mobile Device Center. That's installed. That's what's going to talk from the computer to the device. I could also use an SD card and transfer the device to my SD card and then pop the SD card out and plug it into my Geo. Carrie, I think you mentioned y'all had Nomads. Was that correct? I don't remember exactly the equipment y'all have. It was Nomads and maybe a Juno.
In Florida, we have a Geo.
You have a Geo. Is it a 7 or a 6?
I want to say 7.
Okay.
And I guess in Windows 10 we don't have that Windows Mobile Device Center anymore, right?
Yep. Well,
what?
Kind of. Yeah. Go ahead. I'll get into that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Question.
What's the workaround for that?
Okay. So the easiest workaround is using SD card. The next workaround is you can actually load the software, the Windows Mobile Device Center software. It just can sometimes, depending on I don't know if you have an IT department, sometimes you have to get them involved. But I have an email that we've put together to help set that up. So here I would just do new email. Let's see. So my workaround is basically, oh, come on, thing. Let me make this bigger. So I have a document on it, but typically I do this. So here's my current workaround. It's fun. It's we have basically a couple steps to follow to install it and make sure it works. So I have a couple different things, and we can help you offline to get that set up. What part of Florida are you in? Just curious, because I'm going to be in Florida in about 3 weeks. I think Tampa is where I'm headed.
Oh, we're in the Panhandle.
Oh, is that okay? So is that the place by Watercolor, Terry, that you were explaining to me last week or so?
Yeah, that's the place.
Okay. We'll be able to. If you want that, there is a workaround to get Windows Mobile Device Center talking to the Geo. My recommendation is if y'all have the option to use an SD card. Oh, sorry. My phone is going off here. Sorry. I got an alarm set to make sure we get the time right. Okay. My preferred workflow is to use a SD card. You just pop the SD card out and back into the device.
Okay.
So I'll show you both. So here I have utilities data transfer. So this is the software that we need. Now, Carrie, I think you might have had a different device. So Florida has the Geo, and I think the other group maybe has something else. If you want to let me know, that'll be good. let's see. Okay. Well, so if I'm using Mobile Device Center, it's always GIS data logger on Windows Mobile. It shows it's connected. If it's ever disconnected like this, make sure it's the right device type, and then you hit the checkbox, and it'll connect. If it doesn't connect, first thing to check is, well, is the cable plugged in? The second thing is, do I have this Mobile Device Center software installed? It is definitely a little more tricky on Windows 10, depending on the update you have installed. But we have gotten it to work. Well, it does work. The other option is to use, I have a thing here called Geo7X SD card. I don't think, well, I have an SD card in right now, but it's locked down. But if I hit this, it'll connect to my SD card drive, which is this G drive. So I made a folder to connect directly to that. And then I just transfer the file to and from that card. So if you want to see how to set that up, I'm just going to disconnect. I go here to Devices. I go to New. And there's a thing, if you're going to use an SD card or even a jump drive or something in the USB port, it's called GIS folder. So I grab the GIS folder. I browse to that drive. So in this case, I would go to my computer. I would find that drive. In this case, my drive is G. I would hit OK. It may have a file path, it may not. And then I just hit Next. Now we have to tell it is running TerraSync software. And then the version will be right, 3, 4, and 5. Yeah. And then we hit Next, and you just have to give it a name. And then Finish. So now, if I want to connect to that new drive, the G drive, I can connect to it, and then I'll be able to receive and send files. So that is how you would set up a what they call a GIS folder, either a jump drive, a thumb drive. Well, SD card is the best thing to use because the geos can't do thumb drives. So SD card you can get for like $5-10 right now. 32 gig is plenty. I usually have an 8, a 4 and 8 gig little SD card. It's not much. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disconnect from that. I'm going to choose my geo that's connected. So I'm connected to my geo. Here's the serial number. Now, in order to send stuff, you need to hit the Send tab. We have Receive and Send. The device has to be powered on. It's powered on, so it's connected. And I choose Add Data Dictionary. We have all these other options, but right now I'm just going to choose Data Dictionary. And then you would browse to your folder where that's stored. In this case, it's automatic because I'm in that project. Training New. I'm just going to open that up. It puts it in the list. And I hit Transfer All. And it's going to grab that file and send it over to the GPS. Do I need to? And then I always hit Disconnect. Sometimes I found if you just close out and then you take the device off and you try to plug it back in, sometimes you go to connect to it and it'll just sit here and it just won't connect. So that's kind of my recommendation. Always disconnect and then hit close. But Ashlynn or Carrie or Emma, does anybody need me to show data transfer again?
I'm good. Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay, good. So what we'll do now, before we open it on the GPS, let me just show you an example of one that we've built in the past that has some rules built into it, and I may have some with the photo, just so y'all can kind of see what that looks like. Let's see here. Might take me a second to find it. So there's my photos. These are JPEGs. Let's see if I have the data dictionary for that. It's called demo. Let's see if this is it. No, that doesn't look like it. Okay. This is it. Okay, so I'll show you a preview, and then we'll kind of go over what I did here. So let me get all this stuff off the screen. So what I've done here is I have a tree attribute, or sorry, a tree. This is very generic as far as tree type, but just so you can kind of see what it would look like. So I have just a few attributes, and we have these groups. They called separators. So this is a separator here called dimensions. It holds a group of attributes, and in this case, it holds DBH, canopy spread, just those two attributes. So I have them collapsed, or now they're uncollapsed here. So they're hidden. If I hit the plus, it opens up, and I can punch in a number here. And let's say the canopy spread is at 60%. So those are just attributes that are kind of hidden. You can add them, make them open and close, just so my screen's not cluttered with a bunch of stuff. As far as pictures, on the device, depending on the picture leaf you pick, it will fill out the correct attribute. So that's kind of how that picture attribute worked. That was tree type. Let me open this up so y'all can see how that works. So here under Cottonwood, when I built this attribute, I just browsed for that image and put the photo in there. So that's kind of how that works. And when you transfer over the data dictionary, it grabs the file with all of them in there. And they're really small. I actually pulled all these off of like some kind of website that had a list of everything in. It was more of an example. We use this for like when some of our customers were doing work after maybe the earthquake or storm in Haiti, and there was a lot of damage, and they went down there and they were training people to use the equipment, but there was a language barrier. So instead of like a tree photo, there would be a building photo or a broken bridge, or just different photos that they would pick the photo of what the problem or what they were collecting on. So it's a couple ways to use that. The condition. So this one's pretty interesting. Right now with healthy, I don't have anything open. If I choose disease, then a new set of rules pop up or new set of attributes pop up and say, okay, you check the box. Yes, if it's the roots or the limbs. So the way this works is I have a button here called diseased. I have the group expanded, but they're not visible on creation. As far as roots, this is the attribute's a menu attribute, but it's a yes or no. So there's only two answers: yes or no, true, false. And the default is set to yes. Default was set to no. Depending on what you check, that information is filled out. If I pick unsound, then I could pick things. What would I need to go and get this tree cleaned up a little bit? You can pick these attributes. So all this is really showing is you can make your forms grow, expand, depending on what you select. And the way this is set up here under condition, let me start here with disease. So the condition will be, if the condition is disease, then show the attribute. So it's basically just if then. Same thing with required equipment. If the condition is equal to unsound, then pick this. So I just wanted to show that you can make these forms grow or change as you need based on these, what we call conditions. So if y'all ever want to build a data dictionary with some of that stuff in there, we can definitely look at what you'll have and kind of work through it. But I do another similar one with the street signs, where they pick a sign. These signs all have a specific number, and the government mandated a while back, maybe it didn't go through, but that all signs had to be collected on, and you had to fill out this number. Like a stop sign, I think is like an MS1-1 or some weird number. Anyway, every sign had a number. So the way this form works, just to show you, it grows as I select. So they only have one thing to select. And then if I pick a traffic sign, if I choose a stop sign, let's see if I still remember. Yeah, R-1-1. So it puts the right number that they need in. If I choose a speed limit sign, then it asks more questions like, what was the min and max speed? So I can do 70. So just to show you all the form, you can keep it simple, or you can have these forms grow as the user selects different data. And if wanted, I could share this file out so you all can see how that works. That's kind of it for the data dictionary. Is there anything specific I may not have covered for you all on that you may want me to kind of go back over? Okay, well, I will move on to the next section. Shouldn't take the full 45 minutes here, but under TerraSync, I'm going to go over, and this is kind of be a preview of what we're going to do on Wednesday. We're going to go over all the settings and stuff right now for TerraSync, navigate all the menus, set it up, kind of go over some of the basics. And then for Wednesday, we'll have the ability to kind of collect some points, transfer some data, and look at some files. So I'll make sure to collect some data before then so we can look at some stuff. Or if y'all want to email me a file, we can look at one of your existing files as well. So right now we'll jump into TerraSync, and if you have any specifics in here, just let me know. I am actually running, hopefully this won't be too big. I'm running my Geo plugged into my computer, so we're actually looking at that right now. Now, if you run a Geo 7X, you have the big jump between the 6000 and the 7 was the way they changed this screen. And you make this big button instead of having to go to the start menu and then selecting TerraSync from the list. It's a big button, and then we can program these shortcut keys if you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on TerraSync. 586 is the current version that should be running on the Geos. There is a newer version, 590, that can be run on maybe a Juno or a Nomad. There's definitely some kind of a bug in it on the Geo, so we recommend on the Geos don't go over 586 as your highest version. Since I'm running a demo version, TerraSync comes in 3 licenses. Standard edition just does basic data collection. That's it. You can't attach a sensor. You can't open existing files. You can't do background. It's a very basic version of the software. It's a lot cheaper, but it has its limitations. Professional is the most common version. It does everything, background files, existing files, sensors, etc. And then Centimeter Edition is for those customers that have a centimeter GPS and they want that high accuracy. It just extends Professional to allow them to collect centimeter data. So in my case, my Geo 7X They come in sub-meter, sub-foot, and centimeter, and mine is set to centimeter. But you can run any mode that you want. So for the user, it's gonna automatically open. Okay, I picked the wrong version. Let me exit. For your case, for most customers, they won't see this demo license like this, and when TerraSync opens, it opens automatically with this status / skyplot screen. So anytime you run the software, this is the first screen that opens up. And for all Windows mobile devices, it's pretty much going to look the same. The only thing different is if you run it on a Windows tablet, the screen is split into like 3 different views. So top left, I'm going to click on status at the top left. This is our main menu. And you'll notice when I click on that, we have 5 menus in our software here. Map, data, navigation, status, setup. And then the exit button is how you close the software. So on Wednesday's session, I may tell you, go to the data menu or go to the map menu. And all that means is if I'm on a specific menu here and I say go to data, you just click up on there and you'll go to that specific menu. Each menu itself has a submenu with different features in it. We're going to first start off with setup. So there are files that we can build called configuration files that will load up all these settings that we're going to go through here right now automatically. So let's say y'all have 3 devices and you want everybody to have the same settings. You can build the file in Pathfinder Office. And we can save this for the 3rd day. It's here under Utilities Other, and it's called Configuration Manager. I have a video on this somewhere too, but basically everything that we're about to go through, you can actually create a configuration file that can be loaded onto the device and set with passwords if you don't want anybody to mess with it. You can have different ones set for different states. To access those, you would hit this change button. I don't think I have anything in here. If I had some in here, and I'll load some for the next session or for the final session, but if I had one in here called SBAS for the free sub-meter corrections, I could click on that and it would open up. Or I could have one called Florida Field Collection, and maybe it has certain parameters that you need for Florida, or one for Georgia parameters, or whatever. You can set that up. I'm going to hit cancel right now. If you ever hit reload, it'll take everything you did. I'm going to do it real quick, and it's going to reload to factory default or whatever you had set. In this case, I only had one in here, so it set it back up. So if the GPS is acting weird or somebody got on there and made a lot of changes, basically it changes these settings. So I'm going to start the bottom here under units. So I'm just going to click on units. Keep in mind, this will not affect how the data is collected. If I change my units to feet, and in our software, feet is international feet. So should be one in here called survey feet. If I set this up to survey feet, square feet, miles per hour, the software still logs the data in lat long and in meters. So this is for viewing purposes, really. That's all this is under units here, is how you view things on the screen. So I want you to keep that in mind. If you need a file later on that's, say, someone wants it in a state plane, Florida East, you can always go and export it out to that coordinate system. Let's say they want it in UTM zone 18 or 16, but you know, it would be in 17, I think, is Florida Panhandle. You could set it to UTM. So this is just for viewing. Here's where we change that. If y'all do use latitude, longitude, and you like to see it in decimal degrees, you would need to set that there under units. So here's our 3. Offset format, that would be if you were doing offsets. We have 2 options. I typically don't ever mess with this. I let it do the auto and set it to true. So that's really it for units. The reason I did units first is because when I come here, this is the next one I go over to is logging settings. If you want to punch in an antenna height, if you want it in feet, you have to set the units first. So that's the only reason I did that. So again, units was down at the middle and the bottom. I'm going to now start over here under logging settings, and we're going to work left to right. Okay, so by default, our software is set to horizontal in the field. I have a lot of people that'll call up and say, my GPS, TerraSync, I have a centimeter geo, and the best accuracy it's seeing is 10 feet. Because the default here is horizontal in the field, and their real time is set to uncorrected. Uncorrected GPS, so this doesn't matter if you have a expensive geo, or maybe you have a sub-meter R1, or maybe a 2 to 5 meter Nomad. I'm not sure the numbers on the Nomad. Or let's say I have a cell phone. All GPS uncorrected is up to 30 feet off. So this is the first and most common problem I get from customers is like, well, how do I fix that? Well, the first thing we do is we change these logging settings to, if they want to use in the field, we'd set up a real time, which we'll do in a minute. The other option is some people don't use real time and they post-process the data. So if you're post-processing, this is the first step you have to do. You have to choose horizontal post-process. I do have some customers that like to go with vertical accuracy. So they would set that to vertical. And then you have to kind of pick a distance from a base station. And if you're unsure how far a base is the first time you're using the software, we recommend going with 50 miles, or you can ask, and I would find out where you're working. And then we would either use this website here called NOAA. And we have all these core stations. These are free stations throughout the U.S. And we would just look to kind of see, y'all in the panhandle here, we have Crestview is probably the closest station. You have this Pensacola station. I'm not so sure. Yeah, I guess this station's still good. It's showing good. So we have a handful of stations. This is probably a good 20, 30 miles, right? Another way to check is when we process the file the first time. But you are definitely not within 5 miles of a base station. So I think our first option here is 6 miles. So we probably just start with this 50 miles. This Florida base station, I'll go back. It's square, meaning it is GPS and GLONASS. These are 2 different constellations. We have GPSs, which is US. GLO here means GLONASS as a Russian system. So when our software says multi-constellation, that's what we mean by that. The base is GPS and GLONASS. So if anybody post-processing, we would want to set this up to display, and that's going to put a number up here at the top. Once we start a file, we'll have estimated accuracy based on post-processing. And I'll show you how to do real time as well. Here where I'm at, I think I have a base within, since I'm not at my house right now, it's about 15 miles from me. These bottom 2, the closer you are to the base station, the better your accuracy is going to be. But if you're running a device that's, say, sub-meter, out to here, 125 miles really won't matter for sub-meter. These lower ones really matter for our centimeter units. Or in this case, to get decimeters, we have one called H-star. That's a 4-inch or sub-foot unit around that range. you know, less than 50 miles is something that we want there. But if you're running Nomads or Junos, those are less accurate GPS units. So, you know, typically anywhere in the U.S. you'll find within 50 miles. There's some spots. Georgia may have a few issues. Some of the stations that are free aren't there anymore, so we do have options to get closer. Some places out in South Dakota, there may be some of this 125 mile, but for the most part, most of the U.S. is covered. You can see here Georgia has a pretty, over the years, they've kind of decommissioned some of those stations and haven't put them back online. But we do have a way to get data from another way through a private system. But Florida's pretty good. I'm not sure. I heard something mention of North Carolina. I don't know if y'all work there at all, but North Carolina should have some stations as well. So here's one in Greenville. So there's a few. Okay, so that's kind of what that base station distance means there. I'm just going to pick 50. I'm going to use multi-constellation. If you are required to meet a specific accuracy, you would tell it yes, and then you would punch in an accuracy. Let's say I want everything to be under 3 feet. So basically the software here would not let me log the position until I hit an accuracy of 3 feet. In some instances, well, one, it depends on your GPS. If your GPS can't get under 3 feet, it won't let you log. And then there's sometimes where you get under really dense canopy, or maybe in an urban canyon like downtown New Orleans, where my GPS may not track certain times of the day. It wouldn't let me log. There's ways to override it, but just watch if you ever set this, just be mindful that it's set properly for the device type and the area that you're working. I'm going to actually turn this off for now, but I do have some customers that actually work with this required accuracy. They run centimeter devices, and they want to collect everything under a foot, so they have that turned on. So just to recap, accuracy settings, I have it post-process, 50 miles, multi-constellation, accuracy-based logging. And I'm just going to click on Done. We'll go through some more of these settings. Auto pause vertex count. If I set my feature to log 5 seconds, if I set this to pause after 5 seconds, it would log. So if I was standing over a flower and letting it log for 5 seconds, it averages those 5 together. It would pause the feature logging after 5 seconds. It just saves you a step from hitting pause on the software. So this is really up to you if you want it set. The default is none. I use it. I set it to 5 or 10. It doesn't hurt anything. The antenna height, this is more important for those customers that want vertical accuracies or vertical elevations. But if you had it on a pole, some of our customers use these with a pole and an antenna. Those are usually set to 2 meters, which is 6.562 feet. They would set that up. They would pick their external antenna receiver. Typically, it's a Zephyr Model 2. In this case, for what we're doing today, I'm just going to say 4 feet. I'm using my internal Geo 7X internal. If you had a Nomad or a Juno, those would show up in the list. It automatically should detect, well, since I'm not using a Nomad, it's not going to detect it. But if you were using the device you're using, it's going to automatically detect that. Don't need to worry about part number and measure 2. So just if you want to put the height in, give it a number. If you want it to confirm per file, you can. If you're not worried about height, just tell it never, and it won't ask you that. And I'll show that. I'm going to leave it per file so you can see what happens when I get to that screen. Never would just skip past that screen here in a minute. I'm going to click on Done. So far we've done the accuracy settings, auto pause, antenna height, allow position update. It makes you confirm. That's if you took an existing file, went out and changed the location. It would just ask, are you sure you want to move this location? Confirm feature end. I have it set to no. Basically, every time you go to save a file, it's going to say, are you sure you want to save this file? Not file. Are you sure you want to save this feature? It's just, I don't turn that on. And finally, here we have a couple left. File name prefix. So when we create a data file, the default is R for Rover, and it'll be the month. So today's would be R12. The day would be 02. I think we're in the second. And then the time, in this case, my time is 2:30, so it'd be 14 and the letter A. If I wanted to give this a name, Eric, it would then name it Eric _ 120214A, or let's say y'all had your devices named a certain way, so you call it Unit 1, and it would name it Unit 1 and then today's date and time. Or you can just leave it default, and when you go to create the file, you can just wipe it out and name it whatever file you want. So this just saves time. Same for the waypoints. I just leave that alone. Last thing here is this between feature logging. This just logs, like, if you turn this on to time in 1 second, if you have your speaker on that device, in this case it's off here, every second it would log in the background, make this crazy noise, it drives you nuts. You can turn that off. Some people like to know where they walk throughout the day. You can set it to a distance. It's really up to you. When I was working for the state, we were setting up these monitoring stations, and we were driving an airboat through these little tiny canals. So I had this set in the background so we could see where we went during the day. Because as we were driving through, we couldn't stop in some cases or we get stuck. So we would just have these marked out to note, hey, we went here, this was a good spot, or this wasn't a good spot. And it just logged the trail in the background. When I ran a survey crew back in early 2000, one of my crew members got lost with the GPS. He didn't know where he started, didn't mark a start point, got in the woods, kind of got turned around. This would have been something that would have kind of helped him back. So not sure if y'all get in those situations or not, but that's what that between feature logging, it just logs a GPS trail. When we're finished, we hit done. This only has to be set up once. Really, the main thing is that vertex logging, antenna height, those are really the big ones. If I set up, we'll skip that. We'll go back to that later. I'm going to start with Gnss settings. The geo, so for the Florida crew, their geo is always COM3. I have seen some customers set this to COM1, and then they go to use the unit. They start up the software. These little antenna cables will try and connect, and finally they'll just time out and say can't connect. First thing we recommend is check the GNSS port, that it's the proper one. In this case, I set it wrong. It should work now. The second thing is sometimes these units get reset and the GPS automatically shuts off. So if you ever start TerraSync and it says GNSS is disconnected, go to setup, go into GNSS, verify your COM port is correct. If it's correct, then you hit this little GNSS button at the top and it'll connect. I don't recall the Nomad and the Juno, if that's what y'all are running, Carrie. I think it's either COM2 or COM4, but it'll tell you. That's just what you want to make sure. We have these things called smart settings. Leave it checked. It just takes the guesswork out of the field user, and it has the settings correct. Here's our new settings. In the past, we had stricter settings, and we were weeding out too much data. Now Trimble just uses these smart settings, so you don't have to worry about what needs to be set. It's done automatically. And finally, we have this thing called Mima Output. This is for some customers maybe go to a depth finder, or some environmental companies may use like Geiger counters or other sensors that require GPS data. The GPR is a good one, where the GPR GPS may not be as good, so they use the geo to get better accuracy and send it over. So that's what the Mima Output is for. We're not going to really mess with that. The main thing here is make sure you're set to the wrong make sure you're set to the right COM port, and we're just going to hit done. And then we have this button here, GNSS. See, I'm connected right now, tracking 11 satellites. We will cover that in a second. Real-time settings. Right now, I'm using uncorrected data. Depending on the accuracy you require, some people want sub-meter accuracy in the field. They could get that with this integrated SBAS. If I click this and hit done, you'll see this little beacon flashing. I doubt I'll track it inside, but once it connects, it'll make a little sound and it'll be a blue airplane underneath it. That will give you roughly sub-meter with the Geo series device. With the Juno and the Nomad, it'll probably be more around the 2 meter range. Some other options for our customers that require higher accuracy, we set up this thing called external source. This requires internet. And in Florida, you have a free correction from Florida DOT. So if you have internet, you can sign up. My SBAS just kicked in. In Florida, you can sign up for Florida DOT. Here it is. I'm not sure where it's at in here. Products. You can sign up for this real-time network where you punch in a port, an IP address, a port, and it sends you corrections in the field. And like I said, I don't know the version of Geo y'all have, but if you find it out before our last couple sessions, I can tell you. If you're running sub-meter SBAS, which I'm showing here on the screen, it's fine. It'll get you sub-meter. But for that Geo, if you do have a 4-inch or a centimeter level Geo, you can get free corrections in the field running from FDOT. In Georgia, Trimble has one. It's a paid subscription. I'll just cancel this right now, and I'm going to cancel it so it'll still use that SBAS. So right now it's actually tracking that SBAS satellite. That's that little airplane there. It usually doesn't do that inside. Just to show you on the status screen, I've got these 2 little airplanes. My GPS satellites are in black. The Russian ones are in red. Anything with a box that's not solid, like this number 9, it's coming in and out. That means we're tracking it but not using it. That's why it's kind of coming in and out. And what I'm going to do here is click on the sub-menu on status and just show you real time. It'll tell us we're connected to the satellite number 138. So this is just telling me a little bit about this correction. So sub-meter in the field, free corrections. Under canopy, sometimes you may have trouble tracking this satellite. So it's just one thing to watch out for. I'll pop back over. We'll go over more of this window here, this status window, when we're collecting data on Wednesday. So what I'm going to do here is go back to setup since I have a couple in here. We'll finish real time. So I have two options. If I wasn't post-processing, I'd probably set choice 2 to wait for real time so that I know that I'm always getting a good position. If I am post-processing the data, then I typically just leave choice 2, use uncorrected, or even choice 1 to use uncorrected. Age limit, I always just leave it 1 minute, which is the default. It basically says if I lose SBAS or WAS correction, after 1 minute, it'll use corrections for that 1 minute, and then after that, if it doesn't receive another correction, it'll time out and resort to choice 2. So that's kind of all that is. We typically just leave it at 1 minute. Anything longer than that, the corrections kind of, they drift a little too much. So 1 minute's pretty good there. Coordinate system, I'll just briefly go over this. Lat long is the default. If you want to see the coordinates in the field in, say, a state plane, you can set that up. So if I want to see state plane, Florida West, you got to pick a datum. It's going to be NAT 83. There's a lot of datums in here, so just pick the right one. Again, this is just viewing. The data's still logging it in lat long. WGSA 4. And then you have altitude reference. You're always going to want to use mean sea level. And then if you want to change those units, you can change the units. Coordinate units. For state plane, you always want to use survey feet. And I should do the same for this. So this is just for viewing. So I've set up the coordinate system. I want to see the coordinates in state plane Florida West. They'll look a little weird when we go to look at them here in the status and skyplot, because I'm in Louisiana, so these coordinates really, they're going to be a little bit off. But there's those coordinates in state plane Florida West, MSL. It's kind of a, with sub-meter correction, the MSL could be up to 15 foot off, so it's not the best. You'll see it bouncing around quite a bit. And I'm inside too. All right, let's see what else we have under setup. This only has to be done once. We did logging, GNSS, real time. Okay, we got about 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes. Last thing here is sensors. If the Florida group, if you have a GO7X, the bottom of the device sometimes has a little sensor. They call it what's the laser? They call it flight wave. I don't know if y'all have this. I'll show a picture of it from the Trimble site. If you do have it, you can set this up to do offsets. And if that's the case, we can show you offsets on Wednesday. Let's see, Trimble GO7. So this will just show you what the little laser looks like. We also do external lasers. That's pretty much the only sensors we ever really do with these. Let's see if it shows one. This one has it right here. So it's that little sensor on the bottom. That's the laser. If you don't have it on there, then it's just going to look like they probably have a laser on all of them. It's going to look like this one. It doesn't have it on it. So in any case, we can kind of go over that at the end. If y'all have it, we can discuss it. If not, we can leave it off. If I wanted to set it up, I would choose laser properties. In this case, it's automatically set to COM6. It's called the rangefinder module. The baud rate's 4800. It's going to give me a little warning message. It may give me a warning message when I save this. Yeah, it'll say it'll be attempted once the file's opened. So if I have an external rangefinder, it will pick that up now that I've turned it on. So that is pretty much it for the settings. Since we're in this menu, I will go under the sub-menu here. If the unit ever acts funny, like it won't track satellites, you've been sitting outside for a while, it won't get above 6 satellites or anything. If it's been sitting inside for a few weeks or a month, it's always good to hit this reset GNSS. And I'll just do this real quick. What it's going to do is it's going to clear out what we call an almanac. It's just basically where all the satellites are located. Once you do this, you need to let it just kind of sit in the open for about 12 to 15 minutes. It'll track a new almanac, and then these satellites will start popping in better. So I have seen it where they've been really old maybe the unit wasn't used over the winter or over the summer for some reason. You're just pulling it out. It's been sitting there for a little while. It's best to just do that options, reset GNSS, let it sit in the open, just log in like this, and eventually it'll kick in. Since I'm inside, it may take a lot longer to kick in. But that's how you would reset it if it's acting a little weird or if it's been more than a few weeks since it's been run. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to data, and we're just going to cover this in our last couple minutes. I may go for 5 more minutes here and then just leave it for any questions, and then we'll go over the rest when we go to start collecting the data on Wednesday. But under data, we have new, existing file manager. So a new file is basically what you're going to want to work on. Sometimes if you work in the morning and you take a break for lunch, you can open up the existing file. Or if you're working on a project over multiple days, you can do that. There is a 7-day limitation on a file. So if you started on a Monday and then the following Monday you try to open that same file up, it'll say it can't span more than a week. And I'll spend a little bit more time on that on the next session. File managers, where you go to remove any files, copy files, rename files. We'll cover this a little more in the session on Wednesday. But let's start with new. And it's always, not always, but for most of what y'all are going to do, you'll probably only ever use Rover. These devices can be set up as a base, but we're not even go there. You'll always use it for a Rover. Location. If you had an SD card in, you would want to save the file to the SD card. It's just a more stable. I like to save stuff to the SD card. I just don't have one in there right now. Here's that default file name I was mentioning earlier. R for Rover, 12 for December. Today's the 2nd. And I'm on Central Time, so it's 14, it's military time, and it's the first file that I've created in that 2 o'clock time frame. And then finally, if you scroll down, you'll see Data Dictionary. Now, we had made that training new, so it'll remember the last Data Dictionary you used. So in this case, mine was generic. Now I have this new one. I'm going to pick it. And I think you all mentioned y'all have more than one Data Dictionary. So depending on what you're working with or working on or at, pick the corresponding Data Dictionary and you hit create. Now previously, when we were setting up the antenna, I told you there was an option to set it to never if you didn't want to confirm the antenna height. So if I would have done that, it would have skipped this step. If for some reason I need to make changes to the antenna height, I can. In this case, I'm just going to hit OK. And then we will see our information. And just to show you, here's the stuff we created earlier. Looks a little better on this screen. If I would have filled out the words, do this in the full word. Here's the photo. So if I use this, and this may bomb out when I use this connection here, but I'll just take a picture of my hat. Basically, if I want to take a photo, I hit that camera button. I have it linked to my camera. I shoot it. I hit OK. It puts a thumbnail. So now, anytime, like if I'm in Esri and I click on this ID, let's put a 101. Anytime I click on this in Esri Identify, it'll have a hyperlink to that particular photo. We'll save this for Wednesday, but I just wanted to kind of show how that's going to work. I think we'll save everything else for Wednesday since we're kind of running up on that time. But the main thing was just the initial setup of TerraSync, which is all these menus. And we'll kind of go over this a little bit again on Wednesday as a recap. Our 5 main menus. So Wednesday, we're going to work on data. We're going to work on this map menu. And a little bit of focus on the status menu. So I think as far as the settings, I'll kind of leave it at that for today, and then just leave the next 10 minutes to go over any questions that we covered here in this session 1. And then I would also like to know maybe next week if anybody's going to have a GPS in their hands. Sorry, not next week, on Wednesday. Maybe have a GPS with them on Wednesday when we go to kind of look at some of this stuff. So I'll just open it up for a couple minutes. Any questions, comments?
I think Carrie may be trying to talk, but
Oh, hey.
okay. Not hearing her.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, I ended up having to call in with the phone audio, so I have to unmute myself on the app and on the phone.
So on both, huh? Okay.
Yeah, so
okay.
I thought this was really helpful because my experience with Pathfinder in the past has just been for importing and post-processing data. And I'm really excited to be able to customize some data dictionaries. And I always wondered what all those different settings were on the units because I didn't get a really thorough training before on either of those things. I've had some more formal training in ArcGIS, but not in using these. So now I understand this a lot more. And my GPS unit will often, it'll disconnect, the internal GPS will disconnect, and I kind of haphazardly figured out how to reset it and get it to work. But I had to trade in the one I borrowed from the Forest Service for another one, and I think it had been sitting a long time. So I'm going to try what you showed me to get it to work, because I haven't been able to get it to connect to satellite. So that was really helpful too.
What are you borrowing from them? What kind of device?
Let me grab it right now out here. It's a Nomad.
It's a Nomad.
And
okay,
so,
I'll grab mine. I gotta dig one up and see. I think it's either COM 2 or COM 4 on the Nomad. It's been a while.
Okay. Well, I only see 1, 2, and 3, and it's on COM 2.
That's what it should be there.
And so, and this is an older one.
Okay, COM 1 is
and
always
also
the cable.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ashlynn, you got any comments or questions for the next session?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not going to be able to make the next session. But I am really curious about that week-long file expiration thing, because I thought throughout the summer I would just keep opening the same file, and you can't. So I was doing weekly merges of the files, and I mean, it worked, but it's time intensive a little bit. So I didn't know if there was, if you answer that in the next session, make sure to watch the recording. But
yeah. Well, I can do it real quick too right now. There is a week. There is and I'll recap that as well next week. But there is a week time limit because of how it logs the GPS data. It resets every week, and for them to post-process the data, that's why it ends every week. So it's able to process that. With our newer software, we don't have that limitation, but it is something that's been around for the longest time. Let me find a file here that has some data. So I have one here for Atmos, and if I tried to open this right now, it's definitely older than a week. It was done in May. We have this thing here called options, and it's called extract data from file. And what this will allow you to do is it'll create a copy of the file so that the old file could be processed, and it'll extract it to a new one. I personally only work on files, well, I usually just do daily, because you can process and export later on, all at one time. That kind of saves a little bit, but if you absolutely had to work on the existing file, you would use extract data from file, and it would just walk you through it. It would be called split, and you would just hit extract. And then it would go through and do all that, and then you would have a new one in here to work on. So that's kind of, it's called the split file. That's the old one. And then this would be the new one that you would start working on. The other option is if you're just wanting to use the data to view, to see what you did the previous week, under Map, you can go to Options, and we have, oops, sorry, I did the wrong one there. Layers and Background Files. So under Background Files, I can say, hey, show data files. And then I can go down here and say, all right, I want to see Atmos gas. And you can select more than one. So in this case, if I just wanted to see, I don't know where this data is, so let's, my GPS isn't caught in either, so it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean by China, or Africa right now. It doesn't know where it's at. But anyway, you know, if I disconnect the GPS, let me do that real quick. Set up. Oh, sorry if I go over just a minute for y'all. I definitely want you to see this before we go. Map. Let's try it now. I don't know if there's data in this file. Someone might have borrowed my unit. No, let's see. If I have a file from sooner. Anyway, it would show that existing file. So I don't know if that would help you at all. But
yeah, both of those would help.
Yeah, so here's the existing data. So if I already knew what I collect, if it's just to view what you collected previously, I would prefer to work on a new file and not have to run that extract tool. But that's just under layers and background. And I'll cover that again in the session on Wednesday. Is there anything else, Ashlynn, that as far as the field collection that you may have questions on? I'll pretty much cover everything Wednesday, but if there's something specific, I can point that out in the video and then make a point to let you know, like, hey, your question was at this time in the video.
I can't think of anything right now, but if I think of something before Wednesday, I'll send you an email.
Okay, perfect. And then just to let you know too, like, so Wednesday will be this TerraSync kind of ins and outs of it. And in the fourth session, which will be next Wednesday, the 2 Wednesdays, there'll be time to kind of recap stuff. So if you're able to make that one, we could do that. Or, you know, if needed, if you have a specific question, you can always reach out.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric.
Oh, no problem. Emma, is there anything that Emma would need or have a question on?
I was just wondering, are the recordings, like, those are available after too if we want to, like, look over how you did something?
For sure. So once we end, once I end the meeting here in a few minutes, I gotta convert it to a MP4, and it might take about an hour, since it's half an hour, because it was a 2-hour session. And what I'll do is I'll load it onto an FTP and send you all a link, and then you can pass that link out, and then you can download. So yeah, it'll be available. I just have to. It may not be right away because I may have to go back to my. Actually, you know what? I may have to go leave here in a minute. So I'll have it up by this evening. That's good for y'all.
Yeah.
And I'll email Carrie. I have y'all's 2 email, I think. Actually, I don't. Carrie, would you mind emailing me? Or look, I have my email here on the screen. Emma and Ashlynn, if you want to email me, it's just Eric_Bach at NEI-GPS. I'll make it bigger here. If you want to email me, and then I will send it to you. And then Carrie, you can also share it to whomever you'll need. I'm not sure how big that file is, but it'll definitely be way too big to email, so it'll have to be downloaded. Emma,
okay.
Are you going to be on Wednesday, or is there anything that you may want to cover if you're not available for Wednesday that you may have question on specific to TerraSync?
Yeah, I'm going to be there on Wednesday, so.
Okay, perfect. Cool. All right.
I will be
Carrie,
too, Eric. But
okay.
I was just going to say I'm going to call in and listen, but I have to drive to Asheville for a meeting, and the meeting ends at 2, so I won't be able to be looking at my handheld. But I'll do my best to call in and listen as long as I have self-service for the travel back.
Okay. Sounds good. And then it'll be
Do we
recorded.
not need a handheld? Because I don't have like a GPS unit here with me.
No, I mean, you can just watch along. You know, I mean, it'd be nice to have one. The other option too is if you have a laptop, I can send you a demo code and you can just install TerraSync on the laptop. It's just really to go through the screens, but watching is just fine as well. It's more.
That would be good if you can send me the demo code.
Okay, I'll send a few demo codes for TerraSync on Windows 10. Okay, so I'll send that out with the link of the video. And it's not necessary to have it. It's just sometimes it's kind of nice to, if you were using yours and something came up and you had a question. Cool. Well, all right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I hope you all found it useful, and I will get on this converting it over. And then if any questions come up over the next 2 weeks, just let me know. We'll make sure to include what you have.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you so much. This is really great. And what I can do is I can share the link to download the file with everyone in our department, because there's like 10 more people in our department that I guess are going to be looking forward to the recording. And if it's possible, I'll also download it and then add it to our shared Google Drive so people can download it directly, or it's just archived for reference for later.
Perfect. Yep, you'll be able to download it. All right.
Thank you so much.
No problem. I'll end the meeting and I'll send it out.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.